Don't mess with Texas, let me tell you. I'm going to tell you folks, just in case you missed that at the end, biggest academic turnaround in the history of the United States in Houston Public Schools. I'm proud to call Marissa, absolutely. Proud to call Commissioner Marath a friend. What he's doing here in Texas is unbelievable. It's tremendous. You see the vision there. You see a guy that's been doing it for years, and it's shown in the work that he put forth. Next, it's my honor to introduce to you another friend of mine, Erika Donalds. Woo! Erika is an educational entrepreneur, is the founder and chairman of the Education Freedom Foundation and the chair of Education Opportunity at America First Policy Institute. A former elected school board member and founder of the immersive learning company Optima Ed, she is known as a national expert on education policy and school choice. She is a frequent commentator and keynote speaker. Erika spent 20 years in the financial services industry, finishing her career as a chief financial officer and managing partner of a multi-billion-dollar investment managing firm. Erika and her husband, Congressman Byron Donalds, live in Naples, Florida, and have 3 sons who have inspired her passion to make education freedom available to every family. Folks, Erika is doing tremendous work not only in Florida, but around the country, as she is a visionary for what education can be. How can we get to where we are today, to where we're going in the future? There's nobody more impactful out there right now than Erika Donalds. Erika, thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. I am absolutely thrilled to be here, as I'm sure many of you are. I've been watching online the incredible speakers that you've had here. This organization is the organization that I dreamed of, that I wished for when I was on the school board more than 10 years ago. That teachers secretly, who would whisper in my ear after events their support of my positions, that they wished that we had back then. So it is so awesome that they have not just existed, but have grown now to over 16,000 teachers from around the country in this incredible community that you've been able to experience these past couple days. So thank you so much, Ryan, the entire team, for what you're doing. This is incredibly impactful, and it's just gonna keep snowballing, I know, across this country. Well, as Ryan said when he introduced me, I spent 20 years in financial services. So I am not an educator. I'll give you that disclaimer now. I'm a CPA, but most importantly, I am a mom. I'm a mom of 3 boys. They are much older now. They're 22, 18, and 15. But when they were younger, I exercised school choice, like probably many of you and your parents, by buying a home in the area where I wanted my kids to go to school, right? The state of Florida has one of those A through F grading systems, and I did my duty as a CPA. I did my research, and I looked to see what the top scoring elementary, middle, and high school feeder system was, and I went to my realtor and I said, here is the box where you can show me homes, because that's where I'm going to buy a house. And we did that. And first frustration that I had with those excellent public schools was during the Common Core days. I love the collective groan. Because if you were teaching, and I'm sure many of you were during that time, you experienced the other side of that. At home, my son was in 3rd grade, my oldest son, and prior to that, he loved math. I love math. I'm a math nerd, my husband's a math nerd, so we all had that in common. But there came a time in 3rd grade where he started to hate math, and he cried about doing math homework. And we're like, what's going on? And a child who was previously advanced in math said he can no longer do it the way that he knows how to do it, in the shortest distance between 2 points from here to there. He has to draw pictures and charts and graphs and lines and all this other stuff, and he was so frustrated with this. as were we. We're like, no, just do the normal math. You put this on top of this and do that, right? No. So I went and met with the teacher. And this was my first, like, outside of the normal, of course I go to open house, and at the time it was not parent-teacher conferences, it was student-led conferences. Oh my gosh, give me a break. Whatever that, right? But so I go meet with the teacher, and I'm expressing my concerns about this new curriculum and my son hating math all of a sudden. And no kidding, in this meeting, the teacher starts crying. She was so frustrated because she didn't like to teach math that way. Some of you may have experienced that. She didn't feel prepared. She wasn't trained. And she didn't believe in it either. So my frustration, of course, then I'm like, oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that. In fact, I didn't even know that she wasn't the one making the decision on how to teach this material. She said, you probably should meet with the principal. And so I did. I met with the principal. And he said, well, I don't make this decision either. You should meet with the district. And so I did. I met with the district. And they said, well, no, we actually don't make this decision either. You should talk to your state representative. I had never contacted a politician ever in my life. And I contacted my state representative and met with her. You know what she told me? We don't make this decision either. It's coming from Washington, right? This is when the federal government got very involved, and of course, no, it wasn't a federal mandate, but yeah, in order to get this federal money, you have to adopt these standards, et cetera, et cetera. And this is when I first discovered that the federal government shouldn't have anything to do with education in my local community. Because what am I going to do then? If this is a terrible program and the federal government is using this carrot and stick approach to have my local school use this type of curriculum or teach this type of way, what am I going to meet with my congressman? And then what are they going to do about it? Go down to the Department of Education, knock on the door and say, hey, one of my constituents doesn't like this? This was my first frustration with the monopolistic and bureaucratic public school system. Now, only a couple years later, back up for just a second. So this was also my first activism. I made shirts that said Stop Common Core, signs, and I put together and joined a group called Florida Parents Against Common Core. And I started going around the state speaking out about this, mostly that we shouldn't be listening to Washington. We should have control over our curriculum here in the state of Florida and not allow Washington, D.C. to control it. So that was a successful effort in Florida, as much as it could be at the time. But just a couple years later, my oldest son he was like in 5th grade. He had gone through the entire elementary school, did just fine aside from that episode with the Common Core. And then my second son was going into kindergarten. And this school, this high-performing school that had done well for my older son, my middle son was miserable, hated going to school. I just couldn't understand it. We're doing all the same things. This is the same son from the same family, raised the same way. We're doing the same things at home, same expectations. He was getting into trouble. He literally cried every day to go to school, did not want to go. I thought maybe it's the teacher. Maybe it's just a mismatch. Not that she's doing anything wrong, but maybe they're just not well aligned. So I waited until he went to 1st grade. I wrote a long letter saying, this is what I think you should look for in a teacher for my child. Because at home, he was fine. In fact, at home, I would teach him things and he was fine. Went into 1st grade, same thing. Miserable. Hated going to school. I said, well, this is a different teacher. What is going on? I met with the teacher, met with the guidance counselor, met with the assistant principal, met with the principal. Ultimately, I was told, after many, many meetings and lots of frustration, that he needed to go on medication. And that if he didn't go on medication, that he would need to be put in a special classroom. And not a special classroom in the school where I bought the house so that my kids could go, but no, they wanted me to bring my children to school. My older son could go to his classroom, and my middle son would have to get on a bus and go across town. And I was like, nope, that's not happening. A, he's not going on medication. You know, just as a parent, you just know this is not the solution. That was his last day at that school. But as a working, thank you. As a working mom, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know, I had never even thought of the concept of school choice. But I discovered the concept when I didn't have it. There were no charter schools in my community. I only knew of a couple of well-known private schools, and I couldn't afford those because I spent all the money on the house, right? And so I, of course, started asking around, asking people at my church, just desperate for a solution because in the meanwhile, I'm taking him to work with me every day. I didn't, and believe me, my work was not very tolerant of that at the time. But I did find this small classical Christian private school. It was using space in a church in our community. I had to rearrange my work schedule, my husband as well, so we could drop him off and pick him up in the afternoons. And I was very nervous about this. He was very nervous about this, of course. Number one, because he was spending so much time on the computer in kindergarten and first grade, and this school didn't have computers in the classroom. And he didn't know what it was like to be in school and not spend hours a day on a computer in first grade. I took him to school for his first day, go back and pick him up. He jumps in the car with the biggest smile on his face. And he's like, "Mom, did you know about the Crusades?" He proceeded to talk the entire way home that day and every day after that, telling me all about the things that he was learning, reciting poetry to me. So excited about the history that he was learning. My son has never been in a special classroom. He's never been on medication. He graduated a year ago with honors from high school. With multiple scholarship offers, and he's playing college basketball and majoring in history. He wants to go to law school after that, but at that time, I thought to myself, how many other Darrens are out there? How many other Darrens are here in my community whose parents are listening to the experts, who are putting their kids on medication unnecessarily, or who know that that's not the right answer, but they don't have any other options? They can't homeschool. They can't pay for private school. They can't rearrange their work schedule. I thought, we have got to do something about this. And I immediately after that found out that there was a group of parents in my community that were voluntarily putting together a classical charter school, tuition free. And I was so excited because I thought, wow, now I don't have to pick my favorite child to go to private school. I can actually have all three of my children go. So my husband and I joined this parent group. He was on the governing board. I was the director of operations because I can't just, volunteer and do a small job to take a big job. And we spent 2 years building and starting and writing policies, and I did all the accounting work ahead of this opening of a Hillsdale Classical Charter School in our community. And we were going around the community, and I was speaking at information sessions and recruiting parents and telling all my neighbors and friends about this opportunity. When we opened that school in 2014, we had 400 students enrolled. That's how many we had room for, and 400 on a wait list. That's with virtually no marketing at all in our small community in the A district, where we have all these great schools, or at least that's what we were told. But what I heard from parents all over my district as we were talking and promoting this school was very similar to my own experience. A mismatch. Something's not working. My child doesn't like going to school. They're getting bullied. It's dangerous. They're not learning, et cetera, et cetera. So I had the brilliant idea to run for school board. I often, when I'm telling stories, I say, then I made the questionable life decision to run for school board. Listen, I had no idea what I was getting into. I don't know if I would have done it had I really known. I remember going to my first political meeting and saying, yeah, I'm going to run for school board. I had started this parent group that started going to school board meetings after we got our charter approved. Because when we went to get the charter approved, it was the first time I'd ever been to a school board meeting. And I thought, well, I'll just sit here for the whole meeting. I could have left after we got our vote. But I was like, I'm just interested to see what this is like. And they were making all of these decisions affecting me, my children, our community. And I'm looking at these school board members. I'm like, they haven't had kids in school in a long time. So there were no parents of school-age children on that board. And in fact, every member of that board was a former union member. So as you can imagine, I picture it as they're on both sides of the table, right? It's the former union members negotiating with the current union members, and who's representing the taxpayers? There was an issue that came up right before I decided to run for school board, where they tried to take over the after-school program from a nonprofit that we were very fond of. All the parents loved this nonprofit. They were running the after-school program. We became a community. We did sports leagues together, et cetera. And 100 of us parents went to the school board meeting to say, we don't want you to do that. We don't want the school to take over. We want to keep this nonprofit. Just leave it the way it is. Nobody asked you to do that. And every parent after parent said, please don't do this. They were going to raise the prices. They were going to make it less flexible. And we're like, why? Why are you doing this? Well, it was because they wanted the money, that the nonprofit was getting for their services. And they voted, of course. Can you guess what they did? They did exactly what they intended to do. And they had such a smugness about them, where they were saying, basically, you're here now and you're upset, but you're going to go away and we're going to still be here. Well, this parent group, we were like, yeah, that's what you think. And there was a lot of anger after that. But I went up to the dais and to the woman who represented my district, and I said, Barbara, you sound like you represent the district to us, but you're supposed to represent us to the district. And she said to me, in front of other people, no, I represent the district. Well, I ran against her. And she didn't represent the district anymore because I beat her and won that seat. And she was a longtime incumbent. But I had a lot of parents that came and helped me because we were awake. I think a lot of us just didn't even realize how little influence we had over the most important and precious thing to us, the time that these people had care of our children, where just the slightest bit of feedback that we had, whether it was about our individual child, like with my son, where I wanted to have influence on how he was learning in his classroom and that he wasn't going to be on medication, or if it was feedback from us as a parent community about the district and some of the operations they were engaging in, they didn't want to hear it. We had no influence and we had no voice on the board. So I ran for school board. I won against a longtime incumbent with all of these parents helping and volunteering. And then I get on the board, and let me tell you. So I was a managing partner at my investment management firm. I had gotten to that level, youngest partner in the history of the firm, first woman to be on the management team. I was very proud of my accomplishments in my career. And I thought that what I had done to get that accomplished would transfer to my work on the school board, such as doing research, finding a problem, doing research, writing up that research and with its appropriate backup and everything, putting forth solutions. Here's different options of ways we can go to solve this problem, presenting that to my fellow board members. I thought they would read it, first of all, and then we would discuss it, and even if they didn't agree with my position, that we would come to some sort of consensus, at least that there is a problem and that we need a solution, and then we would find a way to move forward on that problem. Y'all, I had a rude awakening. First of all, as soon as I got on the board, they changed the rules. because I was in the minority. And they made it so that you could not put anything on the agenda unless you had a majority vote of the board. So for 3.5 years, I was blocked from even putting anything on the agenda. Yes. In addition to that, we had over $1 billion budget. My very first initiative was to get an internal audit function within this organization. So I'm an accountant. This is no-brainer. It's all the best practices is to have internal audit. You do a deep dive in different areas of your organization and make sure that because a regular audit, if you don't know this, a regular financial audit, they'll be like, oh, we're audited. Yeah, okay. It doesn't do a deep dive in efficiency and operations and compliance. It's a very surface level audit, the one that they have to do every year. So an internal audit function makes you go deep into each area and you pick which area you do every year, and it's a best practice for large organizations. And of course, I presented all this research. And if this was a public company and the CEO, which was my superintendent, argued like that against an internal audit, you would have the SEC in there the next week looking deeply into that organization to see what is going on that they are so resistant to these best practices. But no, not in the school system. It took me all 4 years to get my first initiative done. And the only reason I got it done is because I made it an issue in the campaign, the next campaign, and I had everybody who was running, I had people at every forum recording to ask them if they supported internal audit, and they couldn't say no, so I had it on video. But then, even then, when these new board members came on, and they were not friendly to me, but they at least had admitted that we needed an internal audit, they gave themselves another 24 months to get it done. So day 1 to 4-year term plus 24 months is how long it took to get one thing done on that school board. So, needless to say, I did not run again. Sorry to tell you this, but I thought there was another more effective way that I could impact kids, because I am very passionate about making sure that all the Darrens in the world find a school that they love to go to, that they would love to learn, like my son. And as a school board member in the minority fighting against this bureaucracy, it was not the way to impact kids and to help all the Darrens out there. Because as Mike just said, they only get one kindergarten. They only get one first grade. This is an emergency, and these people move too slow. So what I did was I started my own district. I did. I started charter schools across the state of Florida, classical charter schools, because during that time, people had heard that we had started a Hillsdale classical charter school in our community, and they were constantly calling me, how do we do it? Can you help us? And so I had a whole list of cities, towns, counties that wanted a school in their community. So I just finally started saying, yes, fine, yes, I will come help you. Can you raise money? Great, let's get over there and have a barbecue and raise some money and get some people to volunteer. And we opened our first school in 2019. That school opened with 1,300 applications. We opened with 600 kids in the school. We grew that. It's thriving now. We opened another one the next year in the middle of COVID in 2020. That was fun. Another one in 2021, and then in 2022, we opened 2 schools because during COVID, what he just presented, Mike Morath presented, was absolutely awesome. I'm so glad to see Texas adopting a classical model of education. I am such a believer in all of these methods and pedagogy. So what we had done during COVID at our first classical school, I didn't know what the districts were going to do or what the private schools were going to do. I didn't care. I'm running a school, and I cannot let these kids miss a beat. And my own son was in the program. So we created the most rigorous, classical, virtual school that we could that replicated the in-person learning environment as much as we possibly could. And we must have been doing really well because word got out, and I had parents contacting me to participate in our online program that didn't even go to my schools during COVID. And so at the end of that, when we were all able to come back in person, we had a lot of parents, about 100 students whose parents said, we want to stay online. We love this. We love that our students are learning at home. We like the flexibility. So we created Optima Academy Online, the world's first virtual reality school. And it's thriving to this day in 14 states, including here in Texas, thankfully, with the new ESA program that just came out. But it allows parents to access classical model of learning anywhere from home or wherever they are with their students, tuition free. And students can put on a VR headset and be with their teacher and other students at Independence Hall, in ancient Rome, on the moon, in the middle of a cell. It's absolutely incredible, and it's doing great work for students and families across this country. But throughout this experience, opening these schools, working with lawmakers on how to expand education freedom in my state and across the country, as Ryan alluded to, I have come to the conclusion that if parents are not acting as consumers, if parents are not the ones driving the decision-making for their children, there is no one else who is going to put that child's needs first, like a parent. The bureaucracy, the monopoly, the traditional systems are not built to meet the individual needs of every child. And you could say, well, most kids can thrive in an environment like the traditional public system. But the data says that's not true. Look at the proficiency rates in any state, in the best performing states, in the worst performing states, in any area. You don't have, unless it's a choice school, that's the exception, right? You do not have 80%, 90% proficiency. And we're not talking about choice schools that are only available to rich people, wealthy people. Look at Success Academies in the Bronx, serving the most disadvantaged students coming from most difficult homes with higher proficiency rates than the gifted schools in New York City. So it's not about where they come from necessarily, but more so that their parents are the one making the choice. The parents are the ones taking ownership of that choice, and it's a complete cultural change for the United States of America. That's absolutely necessary, in my opinion. You see, I have this letter. It's from when Darren, my second son, went into kindergarten. I still have it. And it said, "Dear parents, do not attempt to teach your child to read at home. You could confuse them. You should leave this to the teachers at school. We don't want any confusion. Please do not try to help us by teaching them at home. You might be using different methods." We've also shifted, as we've seen in the nation, to no homework, right? Any of your districts say no homework, no homework? Why is that? Take it out of the hands of parents, right? We don't need parents' help. We don't need parents to bring their kids to school. We don't need them to feed the children. We don't need them to get the kids after school. We don't need them to help with homework. And in some cases, we're even telling them, please don't teach your children. That's a complete culture. And then we say, the reason why kids can't learn is because parents aren't involved enough. I mean, what a mixed message that is. But I often use Miami-Dade County as an example of a school choice county and the difference that it can make. Miami-Dade County, under the prior superintendent, now this is the third largest school district in the country, urban school district, obviously, majority minority, majority low income, majority non-English speaking county. 75% of Miami-Dade students are in a school that is not their zone school, chosen by their parents. So what that tells me is that it doesn't matter what their income is, whether they speak English, the majority of them will find a way to select a school that they believe is best for their kids. And when you think about 75% are choosing an outside their zone school, there's got to be 10, maybe even 15% that chose their zone school. They knew that's where they wanted their child to go. So if in a county like that, in an urban community, you get 85 to 90% that are making a choice, that's pretty darn good. And I think it refutes the criticism that in a school choice environment, there will be some parents that just don't do it. Yeah, maybe some, but not very many. And enough of them will do it that you create a culture where parents are taking ownership of what is happening with their children and their children's education, which is far more valuable than not. But what's more important about Miami-Dade is that it's the top performing urban school district in the country. And I think those two things are very related. They have a lot of different magnet programs. They have learned that if you give choices, if you give parents options, you actually have to provide different options. Because otherwise, there's a robust charter community that's going to welcome those kids in. And now in Florida, we have universal school choice, lots of private programs popping up. So what did the school district do? Well, in addition to closing schools that parents didn't want, which is absolutely necessary, they also created differentiated programs across the spectrum, from magnets to recruiting charter schools in the community as well. So I think it's a great example of a forward-thinking district, and we have more work to do, no doubt. But it refutes that we can't do this in certain communities, or that certain types of parents don't care enough to make those choices for their kids. No way. I've met too many parents, regardless of where they come from, who want to make that choice. I have a vision for education in America, and it is an education freedom economy, where every education dollar is parent directed, where every parent can see how much money is going to be spent on their child's education. If their child is special needs, if they are gifted, if they're eligible for IDEA funds or Title I funds, all of that is in a portal where parents can see, and they make an active choice. I want this money to go to my local school district, that's where I'm going to send my child, or here's all the other options that you have. And I don't just want this school from 8 to 3 or that school from 8 to 3. See, we've seen in Florida that education freedom can mean much more than that, where even my own youngest son, who attended our virtual reality school during middle school, is now in a hybrid program where he's in school for half a day. In the afternoon, as a high schooler, they're helping them establish apprenticeships, internships, jobs related to their field where they want to have a career. But then, he's struggled a little bit in some subject areas, so I also have tutors in those areas where he needs a little extra help and attention one-on-one. And I can take my scholarship dollars in Florida and use those scholarship dollars on all of those things. The hybrid program, the transportation to the internship, the tutoring, the homeschool extension sports program that he does at a local private school so that he can play sports and go to clubs. All of that can be paid for with those education dollars from the state. It's an incredible innovation that has happened in Florida, and that is happening around the country, and we're going to continue to expand that. The federal program, I'm sure you're aware of, is starting next year, where likewise, any child, not just a child who's opted out of the public system, but even those who are still in the public system, can access some of these private donated dollars and get additional tutoring, enrichment. You can purchase materials for them to use at home. They can do dual enrollment. They can get certifications with those federal tax credit dollars in the 30 or so states that have opted in so far, hopefully many more. But this is going to give people a taste of education freedom that they have not had before, and I think it's the start, it's the foot in the door in some of these states that have been very resistant to any form of school choice. But let me tell you something. Education freedom is educator freedom. My foundation, the Education Freedom Foundation, helps founders start school programs. And I should say education programs because there's so much variety now in the innovations that people are coming up with. And most of those people, those founders, those edupreneurs as we call them, are teachers like yourselves, people who have felt hogtied by the administration, by the bureaucracy, and have always had a vision for a different type of learning environment. One that we just recently honored is a farm co-op, where the students are coming to the farm half a day, 3 days a week, and they're not just learning farming at the farm. They're learning math, science, reading, right? They're learning things on the farm, but not just the farming. And these kids are just lit up with joy and pride in what they're learning. And this former teacher is living a dream of hers to have this school. And frankly, she's making more money than she did in the classroom. Many of our founders do. Because guess what? You have a talent, a dream, a desire to offer something directly to parents. This education freedom environment and the future of education is going to allow you to do that and the freedom to do that. But that's not for everyone. I recognize that. Those of you who are serving our students, and thank you for the work that you do. I couldn't be a classroom teacher. And so I am so grateful for every single one of you and the service that you do to our country every day. You are serving our country. Because the future of this nation depends on our children knowing its history, like the commissioner was talking about, being able to defend those rights, but they have to know them to be able to defend them. And you all are making sure that they have the critical thinking to ensure these liberties that we're celebrating in our 250th year. I mean, it's one of the most critical things, if not the most critical thing. And so I'm so grateful. Some of the innovations, if you will, that Florida has led on and that this amazing organization has helped with, paycheck protection is one of them. And I think that every state needs to pass paycheck protection. And what does that mean? It means that teachers' union dues cannot be taken out by the district before the teacher ever sees the money. I think there will probably be a legal case on this at some point because what's happening is taxpayers are subsidizing the deduction of union dues. And as we know, those union dues are being used for political causes. And there's no reason that taxpayer money should be used to subsidize the deduction of those dues. And certainly don't want teachers not to be able to see the money that is going out. It just makes it that much harder to opt out of those union dues. I had a teacher when I was on the school board, a middle school teacher, and middle school in Naples is from 9 to 3:50 or something like that. And she wanted to leave the union. And they told her, well, you can do that in person. And the hours for the union office are from 9 to 4. And she said, well, can I just mail it in? Nope. Can't mail it in. That was at the time. That's 10 years ago. Now you can mail it in. They require an easier opt-out in Florida along with that paycheck protection. And so we have a lot of unions that are at risk of decertification. You know, we believe that every employee, whether you're a teacher or otherwise, has the right to negotiate directly with their employer. It's a right of you as a human being. Just recently, a huge win that we just had, and I'm going to wrap up with this. When I was on the school board, I tried to get a bonus for veteran teachers to go out to Immokalee, the most disadvantaged area of our community, because 1 in every 5 teachers in Immokalee were new to the profession. 1 in every 5. Of course, the scores were very low out there. The rest of the county, it was 1 every 16. So I said, that's not right, right? We have to work on this. So why don't we give veteran high-performing teachers a bonus? It will increase every year for 3 years to go out to Immokalee and to serve those students. And I actually got my fellow board members to agree to this. It was a miracle. And we set aside money in the budget to do that, and then we sent it to the union bargaining table. Well, it came back with, I had it going up every year. It was like $1,500 the first year, $3,500, and then it was like $6,000 the third year. So it was encouraged them to stay out there for a few years. Came back 1 year, no requirements for the type of teacher. Doesn't have to be a veteran teacher, doesn't have to be high performing. $2,500 for every teacher that worked out there, 1 year. So what did that do to that ratio, 1 in 5 and 1 in 16? Absolutely nothing. Well, the same thing 10 years later happened in Lee County, neighboring. Lee County, the board passed a resolution. They were going to pay bonuses to teachers that were in hard-to-staff areas, teaching the most risky schools, disadvantaged communities, the lowest performing schools in the district. Nice $7,000 to $9,000 bonuses for those teachers, and of course the union sued. But guess what? Lee County won. They won, and now those teachers are getting those bonuses, and immediately the openings plummeted to near zero because they were able to give bonuses to teachers to fill those hard-to-staff positions. So 10 years, I couldn't get the school board to even fight for it, to now it's signed, sealed, delivered, it's done legally, we can do it. That's the kind of progress that I see in this industry across the country as I'm traveling. I'm speaking to legislators, I'm speaking to governors, working at the federal level. It has accelerated tremendously. And we're going to see that, and you all are going to be a part of it because you are here on the ground floor of just the start of the reforms that are necessary in this country. We have so many people that are on fire to make sure that our kids can achieve the American dream. We owe them that. And I'm so grateful that you all are here to do it and that you have the courage to stand up to the union. The union has been working for decades on building a monopoly so that they can control your classroom. But we are building a movement to take that control back and give it back to you, the teachers and the educators in this country. Thank you so much. Thank you for the great work that you do. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. Thank you.